I did not cry. I did not shake. I just stood there in the break room, my hands still warm from the coffee mug I'd been holding, reading the text on my phone like it was written in a language I almost understood. Effective immediately. We're moving in a different direction. Don't bother coming in Monday. That was it. No call. No meeting. No thank you for 7 years. Just 11 words from my manager sent at 7:14 on a Friday evening while I was at my sister's rehearsal dinner, still wearing the blush pink dress my mother had picked out for me, still smiling from the champagne toast 20 minutes before. I put my phone face down on the bathroom counter and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I went back out, sat down next to my mum, and finished my dinner. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without context. My name is Alicia. I'm 32 years old. For 7 years, I worked as a senior compliance analyst at Harman & Reeves Financial Group, a mid-sized wealth management firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was good at my job. I don't say that to brag, I say it because it matters to the story. I had a spotless record, 2 Employee of the Quarter plaques sitting on my desk, and a stack of client letters praising my work that my manager, a man I'll call Mr. Warren, had printed and put in my file himself. Mr. Warren had hired me right out of grad school. He mentored me. He told me once, at company dinner, that I was the most reliable person on this floor. I trusted him the way you trust someone who's watched you grow up professionally, which is to say, completely, and perhaps unwisely. His son, whose name was Everett, joined the firm 18 months ago. Everett was 26. He had a business degree from a school I'd never heard of and a handshake that felt like he practiced it in a mirror. He came in with the title of Junior Director of Client Relations, which, as far as I could tell, meant he attended meetings, forwarded emails, and took credit for other people's work. Within 3 months, he was CC'd on everything. Within 6, he was sitting in on client calls that had nothing to do with his role. Within a year, he was being introduced to major accounts as the firm's emerging leadership. I watched all of it and said nothing, because that was my job, to watch, assess, and stay in my lane. The problem was that Everett didn't believe in lanes. He started small, asking me questions about compliance protocols, which I answered, because that's what you do when a colleague asks a work question. Then he started presenting those answers in meetings as his own insights. Then he began suggesting quietly to Mr. Warren that some of my methods were outdated. I found out about that last part from a colleague who sat 2 desks down and had better hearing than anyone gave her credit for. I documented everything. Dates, times, what was said and to whom. I kept a folder on my personal laptop that I updated every Friday evening before I logged off. I don't know why I started doing it. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that makes you check twice that the stove is off before you leave for vacation. Then my sister announced her wedding. My sister is 2 years younger than me. Her fiancé is a good man, a high school science teacher who coaches JV baseball on weekends and makes my sister laugh in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. I was her maid of honor. I had been planning that role for months. The bachelorette trip to Savannah, the rehearsal dinner centerpieces, the toast I'd been rewriting on napkins since February. The wedding was a Saturday in April. The text from Everett, because it turned out the text wasn't even from Mr. Warren, it was from Everett, using his father's work account, came on the Friday evening before. I found that out the next morning sitting at the kitchen table of the hotel suite where my sister and I had stayed the night before the wedding, both of us in robes, eating room service eggs. She knew something was wrong. My sister has always been able to read my face the way some people read weather. "Show me," she said. I showed her the text. She set down her fork. "Alicia, I know. On my wedding weekend." "I know." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You're not going to spiral about this today." "I'm not spiraling, good." "Because I need you present, and also because," she paused, in that way she does when she's about to say something significant. "Marcus already knows. Marcus is her fiancé, and Marcus, as it turned out, was not just a high school science teacher who coached JV baseball. Marcus was also the son of Leonard Cole, who sat on the board of 3 financial institutions in the Southeast, including, and here is where the story shifts, Harman & Reeves Financial Group's largest institutional investor. I had known Marcus for 2 years. I had eaten Thanksgiving dinner with his family. I had genuinely never made that connection, because why would I? To me, he was the man who brought my sister flowers every Friday and remembered that I liked my coffee with oat milk. I had not known that when Marcus called his father the previous night to tell him he was getting married, his father had asked how my sister's family was doing, and Marcus had mentioned, in passing, that his soon-to-be sister-in-law had apparently just been fired from Harmon and Reeves by a text message on the night before the wedding. I did not know any of this yet. I finished my eggs, did my sister's hair, and went to go get married to watch her get married. To watch her get married, I mean. I was the maid of honor. I was holding it together. The ceremony was at a garden venue outside the city. White chairs on a lawn, wisteria climbing a stone wall, the kind of late April afternoon that feels like the world briefly got everything right. My sister walked down the aisle on my father's arm, and I stood at the altar and held her bouquet and thought, for the entire 22 minutes of that ceremony, about absolutely nothing except her face. I am proud of that. The reception started at 6. By 7, I had given my toast, danced with my parents, eaten half a plate of short rib, and was standing near the bar with my heels off when I felt my phone buzz in the small pocket of my bridesmaid dress. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me step outside onto the venue's side terrace, the string lights blurring behind me, and pick up. "Is this Alicia?" The voice was older, measured, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who has never once rushed a sentence. "It is," I said. "This is Leonard Cole. I believe you know my son Marcus." I sat down on a stone bench. Mr. Cole was brief and direct. He told me he'd been made aware of how my employment had been terminated. He told me he had, that afternoon, requested a full internal audit of recent personnel actions at Harmon and Reeves. He told me that he expected, based on what he'd already been told, that the audit would reveal a number of irregularities, and he told me that if I was interested, his office would be happy to connect me with the firm's HR director and outside legal counsel first thing Monday morning. "I want to be honest with you," he said. "I'm not doing this as a favor. I'm doing this because what was done to you is wrong, and because the firm I've invested in should not be run this way." I sat on that stone bench for a while after I hung up. The string lights hummed. Inside, I could hear the DJ starting a slow song. Someone was laughing loudly, the good kind of laughing. I went back inside and danced with my mother. Monday came. I had spent Sunday doing two things: writing down every incident I could remember, in chronological order, with as much detail as possible, and making sure my personal laptop, the one with the documentation folder, was backed up in 3 places. My meeting with HR was at 10. I brought the documentation. I brought printed emails I'd forwarded to my personal account months earlier because something in me had said, "Keep the copy." I brought the text message, screenshot and timestamped. And I brought, because the HR director asked me to, a written account of every kind interaction I had managed independently that Everett had later claimed involvement in. That list was 11 pages. The HR director, a woman named, well, I'll just call her the HR director, read all 11 pages without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "Did you bring this prepared, or did you put this together this weekend?" "This weekend," I said, "but the documentation is from the past 14 months. She nodded slowly, the kind of nod that means something. The audit that Leonard Cole had requested took 9 business days. During those 9 days, I heard nothing official. I went to yoga. I had lunch with my sister, who was briefly home before leaving for her honeymoon. I reorganized my closet. I did not refresh my email compulsively. Much. On the 10th business day, I received a certified letter from Harmon and Reeves. It was a settlement offer. It included back pay, severance, a formal written apology, and the removal of any termination record from my employment file, replaced with the notation that I had departed in good standing. It also, in a separate paragraph written in careful legal language, noted that Everett would no longer be employed with the firm. I read that paragraph twice. I called my mum. She cried. I did not cry, which I think surprised her. I had already done that, quietly, by myself, on the Sunday after the rehearsal dinner, sitting in my car in the hotel parking garage for about 15 minutes before I went back upstairs to be the maid of honor my sister needed. Here is what I found out, piece by piece, over the following weeks. Everett had, in fact, been the one to send the termination text. He had convinced his father, who was dealing with a health issue he hadn't told anyone about, and who had been leaning on Everett more than was wise, that I was a compliance liability and that my position should be restructured before a regulatory review the firm had coming up. He had fabricated a performance concern that appeared nowhere in my file. He had done it, as best anyone could tell, because 3 weeks earlier I had flagged an irregularity in a client account that Everett had been managing, and he was afraid I'd find more. There was more. The audit found it. Mr. Warren Everett's father, my former mentor, resigned. Not because he was forced to, exactly, but because the audit made clear that he had signed off on personnel decisions without reviewing them carefully, and that his judgment over the past year had been significantly compromised by his willingness to trust his son. I do not know exactly how that conversation happened between him and the board. I know only that a firm-wide email went out on a Tuesday morning announcing that he would be stepping down, and that he had expressed his deep regret for recent events. I did not feel victorious when I read that. I felt something more complicated, a kind of grief almost, for the mentor I thought he was. I'm not sure what to do with that feeling yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe it just lives there. Everett, I heard 2 channels I won't specify, had already left Charlotte. His LinkedIn profile, which I will admit I looked at exactly once, had been scrubbed of his time at Harman & Reeves entirely. He listed himself as exploring new opportunities. I did not wish him well, but I also decided not to spend time thinking about him. He had taken up enough of my calendar. My sister called me from her honeymoon from a beach in Portugal to ask how I was doing. I'm good, I said, and meant it. Did you figure out what you're going to do next? She asked. I had, actually. During the 9 business days of the audit, I had done something other than reorganize my closet. I'd taken calls from 2 other firms, both of whom had reached out through professional contacts afterward, carefully and quietly, began to circulate about what had happened at Harman & Reeves. I'd also had a 2-hour conversation with a woman I'd met at an industry conference 2 years prior who ran a boutique compliance consulting firm and had told me then, over bad conference centre coffee, that she'd hire me if I ever wanted to go independent. She had meant it. I took her up on it. The role was a senior partnership, my own client portfolio, flexibility I'd never had working for someone else, and compensation that made my previous salary look like a rough draft. Good, my sister said. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear the ocean in the background. Or maybe that was just the connection. Can I tell you something? Always. When I saw your face at the rehearsal dinner, when you came back from the bathroom and sat down and just smiled and ate your food like nothing had happened, I thought, she's going to be okay. I knew it then. I didn't say anything for a second. I was terrified, I admitted. I know, she said. That's not what I said. I said you were going to be okay. I think about what I would tell someone who is in the middle of what I was in the middle of, standing in a hotel bathroom, reading 11 words that were meant to break something in you, with a rehearsal dinner waiting on the other side of the door. I would tell them, document everything, not because you're planning for war, but because precision is its own form of dignity. I would tell them that the people who underestimate you are often the ones who need to the most. I would tell them that timing, theirs and yours, matters more than anyone wants to admit, and that sometimes the thing that looks like the worst possible moment turns out to be the one that finally moved everything. And I would tell them what my sister told me, that being okay and being terrified are not opposites. You can hold both. You just have to decide which one you're going to let steer. Everett thought he was handing me a problem. He handed me a direction instead. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the phone call from Leonard Cole, not the settlement letter, not the morning I signed my name to a partnership agreement that changed everything. It's smaller than all of that. It's me in a hotel bathroom, reading 11 words on a screen, and then putting my phone face down on the counter and walking back out to a rehearsal dinner. That choice to not collapse, to not react, to finish my food and smile at my sister across the table, wasn't toughness in the way people usually mean it. It wasn't pretending nothing had happened. It was something quieter. It was deciding that the way I carried myself in that moment was mine to control, even when everything else wasn't. I think about Everett a lot, actually. Not with anger anymore, mostly with a kind of clarity. He thought the advantage was in the move. in striking fast, in using his father's account, in timing it for a weekend when he assumed I'd be distracted and emotional and slow to respond. What he didn't understand was that the years I'd spent doing my job with precision, keeping records not because I suspected anything but because that's simply how I worked, would be the very thing that made his move backfire completely. You can't outmaneuver someone who never cut corners. There's nothing to exploit. That's the part that took me a while to understand about my own story. The documentation folder on my laptop wasn't a strategy. It was just integrity, practiced consistently, long before I knew I'd need it. And when the moment came, it spoke for itself. 11 pages, 14 months. Every date, every meeting, every claim that wasn't mine that got presented as someone else's. I didn't build that folder to win. I built it because I believed that what actually happened should be on record. The winning came later as a consequence of that belief. The intelligence piece, knowing which course to take, which doors to walk through, how to sit in that HR meeting and let the documents do the talking rather than my emotions, that came from years of paying attention. Of learning the difference between reacting and responding. Everett reacted to his fear of being caught by making a reckless decision. I responded to mine by sleeping on it, calling my sister and showing up Monday morning with a folder and a clear head. And then there's the staying power of it all. The part where you don't get to know how it ends while you're in the middle of it. The 9 business days of the audit, when I had no idea what the outcome would be. The Sunday in the parking garage when I let myself feel all of it for 15 minutes and then went back upstairs. You don't get to skip that part. Nobody does. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. It just turned out, in my case, that doing things right for 7 years created a paper trail that no one could argue with. I didn't win because the universe decided I deserved it. I won because the evidence was there, because the right person happened to ask the right question, and because I had spent years being someone whose record could hold up under scrutiny. That's the thing I'd want someone to take from this. Not that honesty always wins. I know it doesn't. Not always, not automatically, but that when it does, it's usually because someone made the quiet choice over and over, long before anyone was watching. Alicia filed that folder every Friday evening for 14 months. Nobody knew. That's exactly the point.